I'm Daniel, 33, and in my family, I was the one who blended in. Not invisible exactly, but the kind of presence people register just enough to ask for favors, then forget once things are handled. I learned early on that in a family like mine, loud, dramatic, allergic to accountability, keeping your head down was the only way to stay sane. While the others thrived on noise and attention, I built a life in the quiet margins. I earned my way through school, got a solid job in fintech, and never bragged about it. Meanwhile, my younger brother Kyle made sure every room knew his name. He was the favorite. Dad treated him like a prodigy. Mom made excuses for everything he did, and the rest of the family cheered him on even when he crashed every opportunity he touched. I was the reliable one, the helper, the guy who brought thoughtful gifts, offered support, and asked for nothing. My role wasn't flashy, IT was functional, and everyone got real comfortable with that. A few months ago, I got a big year-end bonus, nothing wild, but enough to finally feel like my efforts were being seen. I didn't tell anyone. I just smiled a little more. Maybe that's what tipped them off. Or maybe it was just my mistake for offering to help organize Dad's retirement party. I thought I was doing a good thing. He'd worked 40 years at the same logistics company, retiring as a regional director. He was proud, even if he'd never say the words directly. I figured I could handle the venue deposit, maybe surprise him with a proper watch, nothing too flashy. But when I brought up ideas, Kyle laughed and said, "Don't go overboard, bro. You know how he is. He doesn't care about fancy stuff." Then he mentioned that Aunt Sheila was already handling the catering. "She said it's covered," he added vaguely, waving me off like always. The day of the party was set at a modest country club my dad had mentioned once in passing. Sheila said they gave her a deal since her friend worked there. Everyone acted like it was no big deal, but when I walked in and saw the sheer spread, lobster rolls, imported cheeses, custom cake with a fondant model of Dad driving a forklift, I knew someone had gone all out. I didn't say anything, just smiled and helped set up place cards while Kyle flitted around cracking jokes with the bartenders like he was the host. Dad seemed pleased in his low-key way, giving me one of his nods that passed as gratitude. That was enough for me, or at least I thought it would be. Halfway through dinner, as people were chatting and raising their glasses, and Sheila stood up and tapped her wine glass with a fork. "Everyone, I just want to say how wonderful tonight has been. And we couldn't have done it without a little help from our favorite nephew." She turned and smiled at me, tight and gleaming. "Danny, thank you for being so generous with your bonus. We used it to cover the catering. Hope you don't mind." There was laughter. Kyle leaned back in his chair and added, "Think of it as paying us back for existing, huh?" He grinned like it was the funniest thing in the world. Some people chuckled. Others just looked awkward. My dad didn't even react. He just kept cutting his steak. I stared at them, stunned, blinking like I'd misheard. I hadn't. My aunt had just publicly announced she'd used my private bonus, which I'd never told her about, for catering I hadn't agreed to, and my brother turned it into a punchline. I wanted to ask how they even knew, but I didn't. I just smiled. The same polite, careful smile I'd worn for years. I took a sip of my drink, nodded, and said nothing. For the next hour, I moved through the party like a ghost. I refilled water glasses, shook hands with Dad's old coworkers, and complimented the cake like I hadn't just been robbed and humiliated in front of extended family. Kyle slapped my back once and muttered, "Good sport," like I was a dog that hadn't bitten. I laughed along with him. Then I quietly excused myself, walked out to the patio, and opened my phone. Here's the thing about staying quiet all your life. People think you're harmless. They forget you notice everything. They forget how much you do behind the scenes. What Aunt Sheila didn't know was that the catering invoice she covered was tied to a joint family account I'd opened to help Kyle with his last startup. That account had quietly become the go-to fund for family emergencies, car repairs, rent gaps, last-minute vacations no one told me about until after the fact. I'd kept the balance healthy out of guilt, mostly, but now I didn't feel guilty. I felt alert. I logged into every shared financial tool I was on: family mobile plan, Netflix, joint savings, the automatic transfers I'd set up to help Mom and Dad cover utilities after Dad's retirement. All of it. I paused them. Every single one. Then I opened a different app, one connected to an account Sheila had co-signed for years ago, during a time she'd begged me to help her boost her credit for a loan. I'd forgotten I was still a co-owner. Apparently, so had she. The balance was healthy. It wouldn't be for long. With a few taps, I initiated the withdrawal and closed the account. There was a system, a very specific order I followed. Because if there's one thing fintech teaches you, it's how to cause a quiet collapse, one click at a time. By the time I walked back into the room, dessert was being served. No one noticed me slip my phone into my jacket. Kyle was laughing with his fiancée about something on her phone, and Sheila was holding court with a few of Dad's coworkers. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out. Calm, quiet, predictable. 15 minutes later, I pulled into my driveway and parked. Through the silence, I imagined the scene back at the banquet hall, phones lighting up, confused faces, people frantically checking balances and calling each other. I walked inside, set my phone down, and just as I started to relax, came the knock at my front door. I'd barely taken off my jacket when the doorbell rang again, twice this time, more urgent. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. Let them stew. But I've never been one for dramatics. At least, not the kind you see. So I opened the door. It was Kyle. His hair was slightly windswept like he'd run through a storm, though the sky was perfectly clear. His tie was loosened, and his expression flickered somewhere between confused and accusatory, like a kid who just realized the candy store closed early. Behind him, I could see Aunt Sheila's silver SUV idling at the curb, hazard lights blinking like a silent alarm. "Dude," he said, pushing the word out like it had weight. "What did you do?" I didn't say anything. I just raised my eyebrows, calm as ever. "Our cards are declining," he continued. "The accounts, Mom and Dad's utilities, my Venmo. What is going on?" I tilted my head slightly, keeping my voice soft. "Thought I'd take your advice." Kyle blinked. "What advice?" I smiled. "You said I should pay you back for existing. Consider us even." He gaped for a second, flailing in his brain like a fish on the line. "You're being ridiculous." That was a joke. She misunderstood. I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms. She didn't misunderstand. She knew exactly what she was doing. And so did you. You've all been doing it for years. Tapping into my kindness like it was owed. Acting like I'm just the walking wallet who doesn't speak up. You know what's funny? I used to believe you. That keeping quiet meant I was being strong. But it really just made it easier for you to pretend I didn't exist unless you needed something. Kyle stepped forward, lowering his voice like we were suddenly co-conspirators. "Okay, look, maybe it was messed up. But you can't just shut everything down. This affects Dad. Mom, what about rent? Her prescriptions?" I sighed. "Don't start pulling the sympathy card now. You all made your choices. You wanted a party you couldn't afford? You got one. You wanted me to bankroll it and shut up about it? That part's over." Behind him, Sheila stepped out of the SUV, heels clicking like gunfire against the driveway. She looked like she was walking into a boardroom she was sure she'd win. "Daniel," she said in that syrupy tone she reserved for when she needed something. "Can we talk like adults? This tantrum isn't helping anyone." I actually laughed. "A tantrum? No, Sheila. You know what a tantrum is? Publicly announcing you took someone's bonus without asking. That was your tantrum. Mine is a quiet recalibration." She flinched at that word. Kyle opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "You want things turned back on? Then here's what's going to happen. I want a full breakdown of every cent that's been pulled from those accounts in the last year. With receipts. I want Kyle off the utilities. I want Sheila to remove herself from any account where my name appears. I want full disengagement from all shared finances permanently. And I want an apology." Kyle scoffed. "That's insane. You're acting like this is some kind of movie." "No," I said, stepping forward just enough to make them both shut up. "I'm acting like someone who finally sees the pattern. And I'm done playing my part in it." Sheila folded her arms. "Fine. Be dramatic. But don't expect anyone to come running when you need help." I smiled. "I've been self-sufficient for 15 years. The only time I needed help was when I needed boundaries, and now I've got them." They stood there for a moment, hoping I'd flinch, hoping I'd apologize. When I didn't, Kyle turned and muttered something under his breath as he stalked back toward the car. Sheila lingered just a second longer, gave me a look that tried to blend disappointment with superiority and failed at both, then followed him. The SUV drove off slowly, like they expected I might chase it down and beg them to forgive me. But I didn't. I just stood there on the porch, the night quiet around me. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like suffocation. It felt like control. Back inside, I poured myself a glass of water and sat down at my laptop. Notifications were still rolling in, emails from banks, auto-replies from frozen accounts, and a few missed calls from Dad. I hadn't expected him to be the first to call, but there it was. I stared at the name on the screen for a long moment. Then I let it ring out. If he wanted to talk, we'd talk. But not tonight. Tonight, the house was quiet. My accounts were mine again. And for once, that was enough. But by the next morning, the real fallout would begin, and it would come from the one person I hadn't heard from yet, my mother. And she never stayed quiet for long. I woke the next morning to 5 missed calls and 2 voicemails, all from Mom. The first voicemail was from around midnight, short and clipped. "Daniel, call me when you get this. We need to talk." The second, left at 6:12 a.m., was longer. She didn't sound angry. That was worse. She sounded tired, like someone who just realized the foundation under her house was starting to crack, and she wasn't sure if it was too late to fix it. "Danny, I don't know what's going on, but your brother and aunt are saying you shut everything down. The accounts, the transfers, even the grocery cards. I tried to buy insulin this morning, and the card declined. What's happening? Please call me." She ended it with a sigh. Not the guilt trip kind. The quiet kind. The kind you hear when someone finally realizes they're not the one in control anymore. I didn't call her back right away. Instead, I went for a walk. No music. No distractions. Just me, a hoodie, and a city that didn't know me well enough to expect anything. As I passed the corner bakery where I used to get coffee with Dad once a month, as one bonding gesture, I found myself thinking back to the first time I ever covered for Kyle. I was maybe 16. He'd skipped class and lied about it. I backed his story because he told me Mom would cry if she found out. Then it became helping him hide a parking ticket. Then rent money. Then co-signing a loan. The favors kept growing while the thank yous shrank. Eventually, they stopped altogether. They didn't see me as the helpful brother. They saw me as infrastructure. By the time I made it home, the group chat was blowing up. The family thread, usually filled with cringy memes from my uncle and pictures of Sheila's overcooked dinners, was now a war zone. Messages flying in every few minutes. Kyle texted, "Hope you're happy. Mom couldn't even pick up her meds today. Real power move, bro." And Sheila texted, "You've made your point. Now undo it." Mom texted, "Can we please just talk without you punishing everyone? You're scaring people." Uncle Ron texted, "What did you do to the accounts?" "The gas bill bounced this morning." I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I sent a private message. Just one. To Mom. "I'll call you at 2 p.m. Be alone. No Kyle. No Sheila. If you can't do that, we don't talk." She read it immediately. I saw the typing dots blink on and off for a solid 2 minutes before she finally replied, "Okay." At exactly 2 p.m., I called. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel." Her voice was soft, but there was something brittle underneath. "Hi, Mom." There was a pause. Then she said, "This isn't you. You're not cruel." That stung. Not because it wasn't expected, but because it sounded so familiar. The way she skipped over everything that led up to this. The way she turned consequences into cruelty. I didn't bite. "I'm not being cruel," I said calmly. "I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. You cut off my prescriptions." "No," I said. "Kyle linked your prescriptions to a joint card I own and fund. Without asking me. I didn't cut you off. I took back what's mine." She didn't speak for a few seconds. I could practically hear the gears turning. "You've never drawn lines before," she finally said. "Maybe that's the problem," I replied. "Maybe you all got too comfortable with me not having any." "Don't you think this is extreme?" she asked. "We're your family. We don't always get it right. But, Mom," I cut in, more firmly than I ever had in my life, "do you know how they found out about my bonus?" She hesitated. Then, quietly, "Kyle saw something on your laptop during Thanksgiving. I guess he told Sheila. So he snooped through my files while pretending to watch a movie in my apartment?" Silence. "Did you know?" I asked. More silence. "Mom." I didn't stop him, she finally whispered. "I thought it was harmless." There it was. I sat with that for a second. Let it wrap around me like a cold blanket. My mother, who'd once told me I was her quiet strength, had let my brother root through my finances like a raccoon in the pantry. Because she thought it was harmless. "I'm not the villain here," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "But I won't keep funding a system that treats me like a tool." Her voice cracked then. "I don't want to lose you." I closed my eyes. "Then stop letting them act like I'm disposable." She didn't respond. "I'm willing to help," I added. "But from now on, it's on my terms. I'll give you a prepaid card for your prescriptions. I'll help Dad if he asks me directly. But Kyle and Sheila are cut off. Permanently. And if I hear a single complaint about that, it's over. No more discussions. No more access. No more me." She sniffled. "Okay. I mean it, Mom." "I know." We hung up shortly after that. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt drained. But I also felt something else clean, like a fever had broken, like I'd finally stepped out of a story that had never belonged to me. That night, I transferred just enough for Mom's monthly medication to a locked card. She didn't reply when I texted her the info, but she used it within the hour. Kyle, on the other hand, wasn't done. By morning, my name was being dragged all over a carefully curated group of extended family threads. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly texting me like I had lost my mind. Screenshots of posts started trickling in, Kyle's status updates, passive-aggressive quotes, and one particularly charming post from Aunt Sheila that read, "When someone shows you who they really are, believe them, especially when they weaponize their money to feel important." That one. I screenshotted, and I smiled. Because if they thought the storm was over, they hadn't even seen what was coming next. I gave them a week. One full week to cool off, rethink their behavior, maybe even apologize if a miracle struck. But instead, Kyle doubled down. On Tuesday, he posted a throwback photo of us from college, me awkwardly smiling beside him at a bar, clearly the third wheel next to his then-girlfriend. The caption read, "Some people forget where they came from. Some of us never needed to buy our worth." It was subtle enough that not everyone would catch it, but the people who knew what had happened, they'd see it for what it was, a jab, a public framing of me as the villain in his carefully constructed narrative. By Friday, my cousin Erica messaged me privately. "Hey, not trying to pick sides, but it's getting uncomfortable. Sheila's telling people you stole money from the family. Kyle said you went behind everyone's back and wiped out accounts that weren't even yours." I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I'd learned something in the last few weeks. Trying to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you is a waste of energy. Instead, I gathered receipts, screenshots, account statements, timeline logs, a full paper trail of who spent what, when, and where, dating back over a year. I compiled everything into a PDF, labeled it for transparency, and uploaded it to a private Google Drive folder. Then I wrote a single, two-sentence message to the family group chat. "Since there have been some creative interpretations of what happened, I've documented everything. Feel free to check the facts before you forward the fiction." I posted the link, muted the chat, and logged out. What followed wasn't an explosion. It was a slow, ugly unraveling. It turns out, Kyle had been dipping into more than just the joint savings. He'd rerouted Dad's retirement deposit to cover an overdue credit card payment of his own, told Mom he'd take care of the property tax, then never paid it. And Sheila? She had quietly linked her business expenses to a backup payment method tied to one of my accounts. That fondant cake at the retirement party? Charged to me, months before I even knew there was going to be a party. The truth spread slowly but relentlessly, like a leak in drywall. A few relatives messaged me directly to say, "Wow, I didn't know." One uncle actually called to apologize for a snide comment he made the week before. And while I didn't need their validation, it felt good to watch the lies collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. Still, that wasn't enough. Because Kyle and Sheila hadn't just taken money. They'd taken years of silence and twisted it into consent. And now, they were trying to rewrite history. That couldn't stand. So I did something that made my fingers tremble, but not from fear. From anticipation. I drafted 2 legal documents. The first was a formal revocation of financial power of attorney privileges that I'd once given Kyle during a surgery I had 4 years ago. I had completely forgotten about it, but apparently he hadn't. He'd quietly kept a copy and used it to gain access to shared records under the pretense of helping me manage things. The second was a notice to Sheila, demanding repayment of unauthorized business charges totaling just over $4,200. I included timestamps, screenshots, and my lawyer's letterhead, courtesy of a former college roommate now working in corporate compliance. The notice gave her 30 days to respond, or I'd escalate it through civil court. I sent both letters on the same Monday. By Wednesday, Kyle was calling me nonstop. By Friday, Sheila was contacting my lawyer directly, offering to resolve things amicably. I declined. Let them sweat. Let them write checks. Let them finally experience what it feels like when someone stops giving and starts holding people accountable. And my parents? Well, that was more complicated. Dad called me one morning and said, "I don't want to take sides." To which I calmly replied, "Then don't. But understand that silence isn't neutral. It's just permission dressed up as passivity." He didn't argue. He just sighed and said, I never wanted things to get this bad. I could have told him that things had been bad for a long time. He'd just chosen not to see it. But I didn't. I just said, then do better. Mom was quieter. She used the prepaid card without comment. But one night, about 2 weeks after everything hit the fan, she emailed me. Not a text, not a voicemail, a full email, typed out with the subject line, "I'm sorry." In it, she admitted to knowing more than she let on, to letting Kyle manipulate her, to watching me get taken advantage of and convincing herself it was just how families are. She didn't beg. She didn't excuse. She just said she was ashamed and hoped that, one day, I'd come home for dinner again. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it. For days. Then I called her. We spoke for almost 2 hours. We didn't fix everything, but for the first time in my adult life, she listened. Really listened. A month later, Kyle repaid me in full. The court never got involved. He knew he'd lose. I heard he moved into a smaller place, and rumor had it he was trying to get into crypto again. Some people never learn. Sheila, on the other hand, tried to get cute. She offered to pay me back in installments, while continuing to post about forgiving family and not letting money define relationships. I gave her 2 options: pay in full or let the courts decide. She wired the full amount the next day and blocked me on every platform. I never unblocked her. My parents still live in the same house. I see them once a month now on my terms. I take them out to dinner, we talk like adults, and sometimes there are awkward silences. But they're better than fake smiles. And me? I opened a new savings account. Completely private. No shared access. No more hidden withdrawals. Just me, building something for myself. Last week, I got a text from a cousin who hadn't picked a side during the chaos. He wrote, "I've never seen you so calm. Must feel good." I stared at that message for a second. Then I replied, "It's the kind of calm that comes when you finally set fire to the bridge they've been walking all over you on." And you know what? I don't regret a single match.